The Texas legislature is open for business, and Republicans have an opportunity to demonstrate fiscal responsibility and protect the liberty of Texans. But will this actually happen? Well, it's time for some Straight Talk Texas. I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, and this is The Bunker Bob Show. Greetings, thrill seekers, music lovers, conversationalists from across the fruited plains of the great state of Texas. I am your host, Bunker Bob Steinhagen, bringing you an hour of unadulterated, unfiltered, and unapologetic conservatism to help make Texas great and America great again. I am grateful to have you watching today on the Bunker Cam via Rumble, YouTube, or Facebook, and welcome my podcast listeners who are out walking, driving in their cars, or wherever they're listening via Spreaker, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, or Podcast Addict. And today's show, I'll be focusing on the 88th legislature that opens today. And obviously the one of the biggest issues going on is the race for Speaker. Now, as those of you who were able to watch my show last Friday can attest, Congressman Pat Fallon was my guest on that day. It was during the U.S. Speaker's race that was going on, and we talked about, because Congressman Fallon had been a member of the State House and the State Senate of Texas, and Congressman Fallon made a statement that because he knows many of the people who are still in the legislature, and he's friends with them, understandably so. They've developed relationships that's understandable after all of the years that he's spent doing what he's been doing, serving the people of Texas and representing us, and doing a great job doing it. However, he is, and in all fairness, and if I'm going to talk straight here, he is a product of a political system in Texas that he wanted to try to defend, because he obviously had heard my and probably this is countless. No, actually, now that I think of it, I actually brought the issue up that we had a legislative priority that the Texas GOP, the delegates of the Texas GOP convention when we gathered in June of last year, we established not just our party platform, but we put forth that through a legislative priority committee 16 legislative priorities that delegates had the opportunity to vote on and to determine which were going to be the top 8 legislative priorities. And those legislative priorities, in order of importance to delegates, were: first, protect our elections; second, to secure the border and protect Texans; third, ban gender modification of children; fourth, stop sexualizing Texas kids; and fifth, ban Democrat chairs in the legislature. And that highlight and that point I brought up to the congressman. That states, and I quote, "To ensure all legislative Republican priorities are given a fair opportunity to become law, the Republican-controlled Texas legislature shall adopt a rule that would end the practice of awarding Democrat committee chairmanships to Democrats." And why is that important? Well, it's important, as I've said many times on this show, it's important because the Democrat or the committee chairs, they decide what is or is not going on the agenda for that committee. And we're talking about one of the most important committees to most Texans, and that is education. The Education Committee is being chaired by a Democrat. Now, if you wonder why school choice is a non-starter, that is one of the reasons why, because Democrats have control of that committee. Now, the reason why this happens, as has been stated again and again, is because the person who wants to be speaker makes a deal with Democrats and says that if you will vote for me for speaker, because just like in the U.S. House, in the state house, it's the same thing. The body elects a speaker. Well, if you have a majority, Republican majority, what happens? The Republicans, they have the majority and they will elect a Republican. However, that's not necessarily the case. It doesn't have to be the case, because in the case of history, what happens here with Republicans is Republican will make a deal with the Democrats and say, if you will caucus and put your vote behind me, then I will assure this many committee chairs. And we can even negotiate which committees you will have chairmanships of. You will literally have control over the legislature when it comes to those items. And so what happens then is that individual, in this case, Dade Phelan, who is the current Speaker of the Texas State House, makes that deal with Democrats and then goes to a handful of Republicans and says, I have this many votes from Democrats if you will support me. And by the way, most of the people that he's going to, most of the members that he's going to are going to be, they're going to be pieces of the furniture. They're going to be lifers. They're going to be people who have been in office forever, that have no risk, have no fear of losing their seat in the House. And so they make that deal and say, yeah, if you'll give me this plum committee chairmanship, I will make sure that I give you have my vote, and I'll work to get other votes for you as well. And that's exactly what they do. They make these deals, and so he basically needs just a handful of Republicans to become speaker. Doesn't need the majority. Well, when I had Congressman Fallon on my show, he said, now, one thing that keeps getting missed is that the Republicans have already caucused and Republicans have already elected Dade Phelan Speaker. They've already decided that, and he has an overwhelming majority. It is the exact same thing that Kevin McCarthy had when the Republicans caucused, or went into conference, is a proper term. When they went into conference, that's the official, that's what happened. So Kevin McCarthy came out of conference, and he had an overwhelming majority of Republicans who were going to vote for him, but it wasn't a majority. Because of the Republican holdouts, McCarthy, we went to 15 votes before McCarthy became Speaker. We don't have that problem in Texas because Republicans, or Republicans in name only, and I say that specifically because when the Republicans caucused for the state house, when they got together, Dade Phelan had already met with Democrats. He already had those votes in his back pockets, and he already had the Republicans who were going to be promised plum committee chairmanships. And so, even though, and respectfully, Congressman Phelan is right, they did caucus, and he did get an overwhelming number of votes. What Fallon was the point he was trying to make is, look, Republicans are electing Dade Phelan, and they have enough votes to elect him, unlike McCarthy, who did not have enough votes to elect him. But what Congressman Phelan, what he failed to acknowledge was that Dade Phelan already had enough Democrats voting and supporting him, and Dade Phelan has already talked about his support for Democrats being chairs of committees. In a report by the Texan, Brad Johnson reported that this from December 30th, that Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan has faced his fair share of flack from his right flank on the issue of Democrat committee chairs. Phelan appointed 13 Democrats as committee chairs last session and is keen on doing so again. This position has drawn criticism from the Texas GOP, which has made opposing Democrat committee chairs a top priority and is even the inspiration for State Representative Tony Tinderholt's long-shot challenge to Phelan's speakership. But on Christmas Eve, Phelan fired a shot back at his critics, referencing a floor speech by Congressman Chip Roy. Phelan tweeted, quote, "Merry Christmas Eve, a reminder the process in D.C. is completely broken. Only a few get a seat at the table. There is no attempt to work together, never a consensus. The Texas legislature should never emulate it." End quote. Don't be like D.C. is a frequent argument against banning Democrat chairs, as the majority party in the U.S. House of Representatives does not grant committee chairmanships to members of the minority party. In D.C., there's no discussion, debate, or amendments. In contrast, the Texas legislature does not spend money we do not have. The budget is always balanced. Since 2015, the budget has been under population inflation growth. Have an extensive committee process with hundreds of riders and hundreds of floor amendments. The 2021 budget passed the House 149-0, end quote. The 88th legislature convenes on January 10th, and that is today. And a vote on Democrat committee chairs during the House Rules debate will likely occur in the days following. Now, here's the thing. The quote from that Mr. Phelan was highlighting was from Congressman Chip Roy, one of the members of Freedom Caucus, one of the most conservative members of the United States House of Representatives. And the problem is Chip Roy does not support Democrat committee chairs in the state of Texas. Dade Phelan does. Basically, Dade Phelan is referencing Chip Roy as a way to try and hide behind the real issue and trying to hide behind a conservative who's basically saying don't be like D.C., and then applying something that Chip Roy doesn't believe or never said. And so we have a fight on our hands. And so we've got, this is a major focus, I think, of the Texas legislature. That's happening today. I'm trying to keep an eye on it and waiting for results to come in. But this is, the Texas GOP is focusing on banning Democrat chairs in the rules fight. And that is, and we have we have the Texas Republican Executive Committee going there and who are there presently and who are putting pressure on Republicans, reminding them, folks, the rank and file of the state of Texas, the people who are the most active, who helped get you elected, these are the people who are saying we don't want this. The reason we have a balanced budget is because we have Republicans and conservatives running committees. Don't forget, folks, Democrats, it was Democrats who are the one, and they're probably going to do it again, as I reported late last year, that Democrats are already preparing to basically run away from the legislative session to prevent a quorum, to stop a quorum from moving forward so the legislature can't act. They did that in the last legislative session. Democrats are not honorable people when it comes to politics. And I got to tell you, I mean, there's a lot of Republicans who are not honorable either. But they do what they have to do to stop the process. It's part of the rules. I guess they're able to do that, and so they do. Democrats, they don't play by the same rules that Republicans do, and that's the problem. They don't. I'll promise you this: when Democrats get control, if they ever do, of the state of Texas, there will never be another Republican chair of any committee ever, neither in the Senate nor the House. You can bank on that. Don't doubt me. Do not doubt me. This happens in the United States House, and it happens in the United States Senate. The difference is, in the House and Senate in the United States, Republicans can introduce bills in committee, but they cannot do that in the Texas House. There is a difference in rules. And so the rules that are being considered today are very important. Now, I had talked last year about the budget surplus that was being anticipated. And in fact, it's even bigger than we had estimated, or had been estimated before. In an article written by Brad Johnson of The Texan, he writes that the historic Texas budget surplus estimate has grown even larger as Comptroller Glenn Hegar announced a $5 billion increase in an updated biennial revenue estimate on Monday. Folks, $5 billion increase over what they had projected. The Texas legislature convenes today and now appears to have at its disposal, and for those watching the Bunker Cam, I will post a visual of what I'm talking about. It now appears to have at its disposal $32.7 billion, a sum that has more than its fair share of stipulations and restrictions. Hegar's July 2021 projection pegged the number at $27 billion. Even with constitutional spending limits and an inflation-influenced new normal, the enormous amount of projected revenue gives the state a remarkable or a truly once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for historic actions this legislative session, Hegar said when he presented this biennial revenue estimate on Monday. Tempering reactions, he added, "Don't count on me announcing another big revenue jump 2 years from now. The revenue increase that we've seen have been in many ways unprecedented, and we cannot reasonably expect a repeat. We are unlikely to have an opportunity like this again." So if you're looking at the image on the screen, the tax revenue basically comes, 53% of it comes from sales tax. There's 7.7 from motor vehicle and sales and rental taxes. 8% is from oil production. There is a 5.3% franchise tax, 5.2 natural gas tax. And this might surprise you to know that only 1.3% of the revenue is from motor fuel taxes. And about 8.9 is from other state taxes. So In the general revenue, the total revenue available for general purpose spending based upon the January 2023 numbers is $188.23 billion. So that includes the general revenue fund balance of $168.66 billion, and a beginning balance of 11.68. Let me see. I want to make sure that I'm getting these numbers correct as I go through them. But that was okay. So that was last year. That was 22-23, 24-25. That's where we see the 188 revenue available for general purpose spending. And so that's what we have to look over. The comptroller estimates that 188 billion available in general purpose spending for the 2024 budget, a 26% increase from the current biennium. The state will also receive an estimated $176 billion in federal dollars and other revenues that are non-discretionary, earmarked already with specific purposes. Over half of the general revenue-related funds comes from sales tax, as we talked about. Without new appropriations, Hager estimates the Economic Stabilization Fund to reach a balance of $27.1 billion, slightly constrained by constitutional limit. So, the ESV's new estimate is double Hager's July projection, a result of the standard transfer of the fund to the fund, and the projected $11.4 billion unencumbered balance, 50% of which must be transferred to the ESF, the Economic Stabilization Fund. Should the legislature spend a large portion of the unencumbered general revenue balance, the ESF could avoid hitting the cap. Whatever money is left over, not spent or transferred elsewhere, will sit in the state treasury untouched. Now, although no longer accelerating and having moderated somewhat recently, high inflation persists and remains well above the Federal Reserve's policy target. Hager's letter to state officials reads, over the last year, Hager maintained the cause of the historic tax collection boon has two prongs: the return of commerce after the pandemic's economic slowdown and government shutdowns, and inflation driving prices up, which increases consumption taxes paid by consumers. Hager, like many others, anticipates a coming recession, the severity of which may increase the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes do not corral and lessen the brunt of inflation. But he maintained, as he has before, that Texas is better prepared than much of the U.S. for weathering a downturn due to the continuous economic growth from businesses and people moving in from elsewhere. As with all BREs, Hager said the projection is subject to change as new developments occur. The comptroller posits that Texas oil and gas producers may benefit if China creases its lockdowns, resumes standard commercial activity, while Russian production continues to suffer from international sanction. That would leave a gap for Texas producers to fill, drawn by potential rise in price of oil and gas. Of course, we would probably need a new president for that to happen. Hager's message is that the state and country's economic future is relatively uncertain, which is true, and that spending the entire unencumbered balance would be both fiscally reckless and difficult, if not impossible, due to a number of constraints. To back up his message, Hager has frequently cited the example of California, which in the last year has gone from an unexpected slight budget surplus to a projected $24 billion deficit. The comptroller suggested focusing spending on certain categories, providing a meaningful tax cut, continuing border security measures, improving the power grid, and expanding broadband connectivity, growing the state's ports, raising teacher and state employees' salaries, and finding a way to generate a skilled workforce. Now, why would the comptroller of the state of Texas, why would he focus on raising teacher and state employee pay? Salaries. That's very simple. He's an elected official. And there are a lot of teachers out there who vote. And he wants their vote. Is that really... This is the thing that always gets me when it comes to education, when we talk about education. What teachers are being paid today is irrespective of the job they're doing. So that's the first problem that I have with some of the things that we do when we give pay raises to teachers. It's all about longevity. It's all about how long you've been a teacher. It's all about if you've got an advanced degree, which does nothing to improve a teacher's ability to communicate and to educate a child properly. You have some of the dumbest people in the world teaching, and I know that steps on a lot of toes. Oh, you can't say anything. It's like veterans. You can't say anything negative about a veteran because if they're a veteran, they're untouchable, or someone of color. Can't do it. Not today, and you certainly can't talk about teachers. But this is straight talk, folks. If you want straight talk, let's talk about the fact that teachers, overall, they work. They get multiple paid vacations, right? Christmas, New Year's. I mean, they get weeks of vacations. And how many? Just those of you who work, I'm going to just say in the real world, how many vacation days do you get? Typically, it's around 2 weeks, right? You get summers off. Now, I will just say that we don't take that into consideration when considering teacher pay. And so this galls me when I see the comptroller making suggestions on how to spend money. That is not Glenn Hager's responsibility. That is not his job. He should not be telling the state legislature that they should be giving money away. That's or where that money should be spent. Not his job. Not his job at all. That is the job of the Texas state legislature, and it is not his at all. But this is what it always galls me when I see people inserting themselves into areas that they have no business inserting themselves. But that's exactly what Glenn Hager is doing. Is Glenn Hager a rhino? No, I don't think so at all. I just think that he's playing politics at this time, and that quote should never have been talked about. It's not the job of the comptroller. You're an accountant. Stay in your lane, bro. Stay in your lane. The Texas legislature has a lot of decisions on its plate for how to spend this sum of money. Now, here's what's interesting about the article: how to spend this sum of money, along with spending the cap that few have shown a willingness to bust. In a December press conference, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick both planted his flag against busting the cap and floated an conventional proposal for approving spending outside of the general revenue cap structure, amending the state constitution. A similar maneuver occurred in 2013 when the legislature created the State Water Implementation Fund for Texas, money from which is used to subsidize projects of the state water plan. Property taxes have remained the headliner, drawing all kinds of proposals. One idea, multiple sources have told the Texan, is a property tax fund that exists for the specified time frame outside the general revenue fund. The legislature already has $3 billion in federal coronavirus aid set aside this session for property tax rate compression. There's another $1 billion in American Rescue Plan Act dollars floating around available too. That's available too. Texas Ports plan a substantial lobbying effort to get a piece of this surplus, and Speaker Dade Phelan has maintained his intention to put a large portion of it toward infrastructure, the cost of which has grown due to inflation. There will be many more interests vying for a piece of the pie this go-around, and unlike in years before, the state can't claim it's entirely strapped for cash. Heger concluded as the 88th legislature opens, "We know we have a responsibility to ensure every dime we spend is used wisely, prudently, and effectively to benefit Texans now and in the future." But again, Glenn Heger is not the individual who makes those decisions. That's the legislature. Well, there is a lot of talk about giving some of that money back to taxpayers through tax relief, and that is something that the lieutenant governor is proposing, which I think is a good idea. Now, Dade Phelan wants to deal with infrastructure here in Texas, and I think that's not a bad plan. Now that we have 32.7 billion, as opposed to the 27,000 that was projected last year. We have a little bit more money to use. The challenge really has to be how much, if we're going to be using today's inflated rates to determine how much it will cost to build a road in 10 years, that's problematic. And it's going to create, I think, some long-term problems, because essentially, when we talk about funding roads and infrastructure and things like that, you are looking at a timeline that is not immediate. That money doesn't get spent immediately. In fact, here in Rockwall, Texas, we have FM 205 expansion that has begun, and that's like a 15-year project. It takes a long time to make that thing move, and the cost of building that road has gone up, even though the funding and the approval of the funding has stayed consistent. So it'll be interesting how that works. But in December, Texas Scorecard had an article by Brandon Waltons that talked about what Texas Republicans want when it comes to issues like this, when it comes to the state's surplus. Now, back then, the surplus was estimated, as I just reported, was estimated at $27 billion. And this report says when it comes to how to use the state's $27 billion surplus, now $32.7 billion, a new poll shows Texas Republicans want to see it used to reduce property taxes. A new poll from Defend Texas Liberty of Republican voters in Texas shows 58% want to see the surplus used for property tax reduction. 29% want to see the surplus used for infrastructure, while 13% were undecided. The poll comes amid what appears to be a split between Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and the House Speaker Dade Phelan on what to do with the surplus funds. Abbott has stated that at least half of the money should go toward property tax relief, committing to put the state on a path toward the elimination of school property taxes. And folks, if you've never looked at your tax bill for your property tax bill, roughly 80% of it, 70-80% of that tax bill goes to your school district, depending on where you live, of course. That may be that may be lower. It may be only 50% if you live in the big city, but the overwhelming majority of it goes to schools. Last week, Lieutenant Governor, this is back in December, the beginning of December, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said taxpayers deserve a robust property tax cut, including an increase in the homestead exemption. Amen. A move, he estimated, estimated could cost 4.4 to 5 billion over the course of 2024-25. He had previously stated that at least half of the surplus money would go to property tax relief, though newer spending proposals appear to potentially decrease that number. Now, I am curious. Now that we have a new number of 32.7 billion, that we've increased it, that we've covered that $4 to $5 billion, I wonder what they're going to say now. I wonder what Dade Phelan will say, because back then, House Speaker Dade Phelan has been short on specifics on what to do with the money, but he has downplayed the potential for property tax relief and indicated that the state needs to spend more on infrastructure. You know, it is shocking to me how many people come out of the woodwork trying to say that Dade Phelan is the most conservative speaker in the history of the state of Texas. That's simply not true. How many times have you heard a conservative say, hey, we don't want to put property tax relief in front as the most important thing? But he says, and I quote, I know there's a lot of politicians who are, wait a minute. First of all, you're the politician, Dade, so let's start there. I know there are a lot of other politicians, I'll put that, politicians who are going around saying we need to go around spending half this revenue on property tax relief, Phelan told attendees of a recent meeting of the Transportation Advocacy Group in Houston. Phelan is, as you can tell, Phelan is beholden not to the people, but to the groups and organizations that fund his election and re-election campaigns, one of them being Transportation Advocacy Group in Houston. Quote, I've got elected officials who haven't taken the oath of office saying we need to spend all that revenue on property tax relief. Let me just remind you, none of this money came from property taxes. It all came from sales tax. So what? So what, Dade? What is your point there? So what if the point that the conservatives coming in who have not even taken the oath of office, excuse me, yet are making is, okay, we've got a new revenue source that we can lessen the burden on property owners. Dade says, well, it's not. Think of the how stupid an idea Dade Phelan is promoting here. Let me just remind you, he says, none of this money came from property taxes. So basically what Dade Phelan is saying is, if we're going to lower property taxes, we got to have more property tax revenue to lower property taxes. That makes no sense. So sales tax is where it all comes from. Okay. So does all of the money go to things related to sales tax? Of course not. It's a revenue stream for the state. That's why this is political speak. This is why politicians, people who have been in office for too long, have no concept of rational thought. They have no ability to just speak straight. They've been institutionalized, if you will. That's kind of how I look at it. They've been institutionalized. He says no one is even considering how much more expensive it's going to be to run government next cycle. He added, the entire poll may be viewed. Okay, that's the end of it. He is basically saying that it's going to be more expensive to run government because of inflation, understandably so. Which means it's also going to be more expensive for taxpayers. Isn't that right, Dade? That's right, but he doesn't listen to what he's saying, folks. Dade Phelan does not listen, is not there to serve the people of Beaumont, where he's from, or the people of Texas. He's there to serve the special interests, which are basically keeping him in office. And understand, Dade Phelan's been in office long enough that he now receives a pension. Once you're in office for 6 terms, you then are eligible, you become eligible to receive a lifelong pension. A lot of people who are in the state house and Senate, they like to tell you, I don't make hardly any money. I think it's like $3,000 a year. That's what I make for serving in the House or Senate. Whenever you hear an incumbent tell you that, ask them, are you going to refuse the pension? Is that what you're telling me? Because before you tell me you don't make anything, or you can't make anything as a legislator, ask them that. You know what? The pension that they will receive when they leave office is equal to that of what we pay state judges. So it should come as no surprise that every year there's one state employee that gets a pay raise. Can you guess which one that is? Oh, I won't leave you hanging. Those of you who live in the big cities of Dallas or Houston, you probably have no idea what I'm about to say. It's state judges. That's the answer. State judges, they keep getting pay raises so that it will increase and it will help their long-term income. You got to watch these people. I remember state representative, I ran a race for a gentleman named Leo Berman from the Tyler, Texas area. Joanne Fleming was his campaign manager, an awesome, awesome woman who is, I'm going to have her on the show soon. She runs an organization. The name of it just escaped me. I'll think of it in a minute, I hope. But we ran his. I was the consultant. She was the campaign manager, and Leo was a true patriot. A true patriot. He's a veteran, decorated veteran, highly decorated veteran, I should say. But he was a man of honor and integrity. Well, he ran against a gentleman who's basically a piece of the furniture in the state house. And had been basically one of the things that he made two pledges. He made three, two of them that I can recall. One of them was that he was going to set for himself a term limit. He will only serve 5 terms. And he would not take any pension from the House. You know what? I don't think that was it. It was that he would set a term limit for himself. Yeah, and there's a point to this. Believe me. So he would only serve 5 terms. Well, I got a call from Nelson Clyde, the publisher of the Tyler Morning Telegraph, letting me know. And this is long. I'd been out of politics. I had stopped consulting races by then. I was working with a ministry organization at that point, and he said that they were not going to endorse Leo Berman, which was shocking to me. And I said, why? And because I have a relationship with Nelson, a great Christian guy, a great newspaper. It's one of the little local newspapers that actually believes in reporting news. Anyway, he said he's not going to endorse him because Leo's running for his 6th term. I called Leo and I said, man, I'm really disappointed to hear it, that you're running again. Can you give me a reason why? He said, well, I just have so much more to get done. There's so much more to get done. And he was a true conservative, don't get me wrong. But he had made a pledge that he would only serve 5 terms. And so when he ran, I had told him at the time, I said, you know what? The Orvis number in what we call the Orvis, optimal Republican voting strength in Rockwall County, has changed significantly, and Ralph Hall is vulnerable, very vulnerable. I had run a race for Jim Lohmeyer against Ralph Hall years before, and we came within, I think, 7 points. So it was not even a close race. Ralph Hall was a Democrat, and so I talked to Leo, and I said, have you thought about running for Congress? And his answer to me just flabbergasted me. He said, no, Ralph Hall's a friend. Ralph Hall's a friend. And I said, Leo, that's, look, there's none of us that are perfect. Okay. None of us that are perfect. But I learned a long time ago, when it comes to politics, friendships, you need to put those aside. You're no longer working for your friends. You are working to represent the people. And that just flabbergasted me that he would do that. That he would run again, that he would violate his own values. Well, when he ran, he also made this pledge that he would not take a pension. Say what you will about him, and look, like I said, no one's perfect, and I'm always disappointed that he didn't run against Ralph Hall, because he could have beat him. Because 2 years later, Ralph Hall decided that his district he couldn't win as a Democrat. It was impossible. So what did he do? He changed parties. Why? Because Ralph Hall is a politician. I get sick to death of hearing all the people talk about what a statesman he was. He was not a statesman. He caucused with Nancy Pelosi. He caucused with Democrats. He was a Democrat. He voted with Democrats. And if you compare him to any Republican, he was a Democrat. He was a Democrat. So Leo Berman, we lost that opportunity, but Leo Berman, I'll tell you, he has passed away, and I'm not trying to put him down in any way, because again, like I said, I thought he should run for Congress. I think he would have won. I really do. But he put his friendship with Ralph Hall above what I felt. And again, and Joanne and I have never talked about this, and I suspect that if and when I get her on my show, we're gonna have a conversation about Leo. We're gonna talk, I'm sure, a lot about it, because that kind of was a great time in both our lives in getting him elected and throwing out a long-term incumbent. But that's what happens, folks. That's what we're seeing. So what is this legislature going to look like? I think that we're gonna know very soon who the conservatives are, who the rhinos are, and we're gonna know exactly what we need to be doing to hold them accountable. Now, as I was talking about property taxes, the Texas Scorecard, Robert Montoya wrote a great article. It's a very long article. It's about a 19-minute read. I will not be reading the entire article. I'll read portions of it, but basically the title of it is Tax Hiking Cartel: Appraisal Districts Bleeding Texans Dry. This is something, by the way, the Texas Scorecard and the Texan are two publications that Dade Fallon will probably never read. Why? Because they don't mind calling a spade a spade, calling it like it is. And what happened is the Texas Scorecard basically got through an open records request on August 30th of 2022, got complaints against appraisal districts from 2016 to 2021. And over a course of 21 days, communications ensued involving the comptroller asking for clarification of this request, then replying with information about what they did and did not have. It was during these communications that we learned about the existence of the Tax Liaison Officer, or TLO. Appraisal districts with a population of more than $120,000 are required. What did I say? $120,000? 120,000 people, I should say, are required to appoint someone to this position, according to Carol McCord, Senior Legal Counsel at the Texas Comptroller. A TLO is responsible for resolving disputes that do not involve matters that are subject to protest under Tax Code 41.41. In other words, taxpayers frustrated with their appraisal districts can file complaints to their TLO should their appraisal district have one. So that's what the request was made, how the request was made, and they received spreadsheets of these of these reports, of these complaints. Appraisal review boards hear formal protests by property owners protesting the property values assigned by their appraisal districts. And by the way, I protest my taxes every year. Every year. And if you don't, you're crazy. As part of the tax hiking cartel process, if a homeowner is furious about his or her high taxes, they are shuttled like cattle. This is so true. Into the process of protesting the taxable values assigned by the appraisal district. I got to tell you, every time I have been through this process, it is like talking to a brick wall. You have three people sitting there who are listening to your argument, and then they've got the appraisal district guy who basically runs through why he did all that he did, and basically they rubber stamp whatever the appraiser says. And the only way, and I'll tell you this, the only times that I have ever gotten, not had to go before an appraisal board, have won my protest is when the employees, they basically come back to me with a settlement offer. All right, we won't give you this, but we'll give you that. Sometimes I've taken it. Sometimes I've gone to the board, and every time I've gone to the board, it has made no difference. None. The only time that you will get your taxes lowered is never with the appraisal board. They are useless, in my opinion. But they are the ones who hear the formal protest. And I'll tell you this, if I don't like the settlement offer, and sometimes I don't get a settlement offer, which is typically why I go to the appraisal board. But a couple of times the settlement was just ridiculous. It wasn't even, it made no sense. And I thought, well, I'll bring information to show reasonably how for instance, and I live on an acre of land, and I've got neighbors who have 3 acres of land. Their property value for the 3 acres is exactly the same as my property value, the raw land. How is that possible? And then you go right a stone's throw right across, basically behind us, is another development. Well, they've got ditches. They've got water sewer systems. They've got new streets, and we are responsible for our streets, and they are too. They've got to maintain them. Ours are much older, and we have much more to maintain. We have bar ditches. And guess what? Our property values are exactly the same. How is that possible? It makes no sense. And the value of those homes sell for higher than the value of our homes. But that is my point is, it takes that it makes no difference. If a homeowner is furious about his or her high taxes, they are shuttled like cattle into the process of protesting taxable values assigned by the appraisal district. This takes up valuable energy and pressure from the ones who actually set the rate at which the property owners are taxed: city council members, county commissioners, school board trustees, and more. The TLO complaints we received show instances of taxpayers being put through further abuse. Now, they don't identify the identities, but this is basically this is kind of a smattering of some of those complaints. The review board was not able to factually and scientifically review my information, instead used non-Gelman methodologies to keep our values higher than necessary, typed a Denton County property owner on May 19th. In 2016, he was one of close to 80 complaints in a consolidated spreadsheet of state complaints that year. There's also Dolores Zarat, who described problems in her June 2021 complaint regarding her protest hearing of the values the Cameron Central Appraisal District assigned her. Quote, "I would never have imagined that the appraisal district would present grave inaccurate evidence. The building in question was not built in 1994, it was completed in 1985, a 10-year difference." She also complained that before her hearing, she did not receive CCAD's evidence of their value. Every hearing participant should be provided with the evidence 3 days in advance. Just like I provided my evidence in advance, it should not have to be requested. Hers, was one of 2 complaints in the CCAD area that year, though this is probably a fraction of the discontent present. The other was from a retired military veteran inquiring about why he hadn't heard back about rescheduling his protest hearing. A Fort Bend County property owner complained about an apparent lack of consideration and justice when he protested. Quote, "The problem was that the panel was not the least bit interested in considering the truth and reality of property values in my neighborhood," he wrote. "I felt that once again I was in a kangaroo court and that the outcome of my hearing had been decided before I even walked in. You're absolutely right." Covey herself complained about a lack of accountability in her 2021 encounter. In September of that year, she filed a complaint. The previous year, protesting for her had been a rather positive experience, and 2021 was different. Quote, I can't believe our appeal was over the phone with multiple people and with no additional microphones on the appraisal board," end, Covey wrote. She also complained that Beverly Henley, the chair of the ARB, was extremely rude, very harsh, and short in the manner to which she spoke to my husband and me. She gave more evidence than she was allowed to give. She had more evidence than she was allowed to get. When the call started, Covey asked who all was listening in on the call, and twice Henley was evasive, saying that only they were appointed by a judge and the law required that they had to be a part of the review board. "Well, that doesn't tell me anything," Covey said. She also reminded my husband and I, extremely rude, that we were only allowed 15 minutes and we had almost taken up 30 minutes. I told her the reason for this is I couldn't hear clearly, and she said, "Well, that's because there's other reviews taking place." This report, by the way, and when you read these, you kind of get a sense that the system, the appeal process is broken, is significantly broken, and there is no recompense when government can give you everything, as Ronald Reagan said. Government that can give you everything can also take everything away. This legislative session, our budget surplus, is something that we have got to we've got to look at carefully, and we've got to know that there are people who are struggling in the great state of Texas, who have worked all of their lives, who have paid their taxes, who have been good Americans, who have been great Texans, and now they are being punished because you have this cartel that is these appraisal boards. So something has to change there as well. Well, I guess we will see. I will let you know tomorrow who our speaker is. I suspect it's Dade Phelan. It's already a presumptive done deal. He's already got the votes. And the question is, will Brian Slayton and the others who are trying to get him out of Dade Phelan out, is he going to win his fight to prevent Democrat chairs? I doubt it, folks. This is politics. It's politics, and it's politics. Well, I hope you will join me tomorrow, because we're going to continue talking about some of this stuff and some other things. I wanted to talk about a call for Cornyn to resign, John Cornyn to resign. I love this call and there's just so much I need to get to, and I couldn't get to today. But we've got all week. We've got tomorrow's Wednesday, so we've got many more times to be together. I hope that you will join me tomorrow, because it is always good to have you with me. I hope that you will have a blessed day, and we will see you next time. Blessings.